Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Data Playbook. Now that we have Week 12 kicked off with Thursday Night Football, we're going to look into the Sunday day games one by one. So if this is not the pregame of the two teams that you're looking for, go look for the other video that should be on the channel. But otherwise, let's get into this one. Here we have Seattle at Tennessee. Unfortunately, the picture didn't render in for some reason, and I'll have to fix that, but it's only been doing it with this one for some reason and not the other ones. However, we can still look at all the data, where we have Seattle here favored on the money line with a spread of 12.5 and a total line of 40.5. We still can see our averages, and we can still look at our rankings. So for Seattle, you have a pretty good offense with a really good scoring rank, a pretty good passing rank, top third for those, about top half for rushing rank, about the middle for rushing, and about the middle for tight ends. Defensively, they're a little bit more mixed. You have a pretty good allowed rushing rank and a really good allowed scoring rank. However, their allowed passing rank is about average, and their allowed tight end rank's pretty bad. For Tennessee, you have pretty bad numbers all over the place. They're about the worst offense in the league with a scoring rank of 32, a passing rank of 30, and a rushing rank of 32. They are at least okay at using their tight end, though. Their defense is also pretty bad, but not as bad as that, with an allowed scoring rank of 30, which is the worst part. But they also have an allowed passing rank of 20 and an allowed rushing rank of 26. Looking into the quarterback stats, you have Sam Darnold and Cam Ward, with Sam getting about 14.7 fantasy points per game, and Cam Ward getting about 8.6. Sam Darnold has had 10 interceptions this season, with 3 fumbles lost due to sacks, and 1 other rushing fumble. Cam Ward has had 6 interceptions this season, with an additional 6 fumbles lost due to sacks. Here's their averages, and then we'll look at how they impact the rushing game. With Sam Darnold, unfortunately the numbers don't show up. However, we can look at it and see it's about maybe 3 or 4% for each of them, so he doesn't really impact the game too much. And again, if you need to see that more in detail, you can see that more with the running backs next. Cam Ward also has the same issue here. However, it's a little larger slice, probably closer to about 10% for both of them. And then where you can see those numbers more detailed here, we have our running backs with Kenneth Walker and Tony Pollard. Walker gets about 11.1 fantasy points per game, and Tony Pollard gets about 9.5. The only turnovers come from Tony Pollard with 2 rushing fumbles. And then with your averages and your rushing carry share, you have Kenneth Walker getting 48.9% of the team's total carry share and 56.2% of the team's rushing yard share. The team does utilize Charbonnet quite a bit, with almost a third of that number as well. And then with Tony Pollard, he has about 70% of the team's rushing carry share and about 68.2% of the team's rushing yard share. Diving into our receivers, you have Jackson Smith-Njigba and Shamir Dyke, because Elk is listed as out. Jackson Smith gets about 21.8 fantasy points per game, and Shamir gets about 5.7. Shamir's had no turnovers, but Jackson Smith has had 1 receiving fumble. And then looking at our shares, you have Jackson with 30.6% of the team's total targets and 39.5% of the team's total receiving yards, which is quite large, and it's the largest of anybody else on the team. Over here with Shamir, we can't quite see it, but I think it's probably about 15%, maybe a little lower over here, like 10% with the receiving yards, 15% with the targets. And it looks like those numbers were actually 12.7% and 11.1%. But now we're looking at our number 2 receivers with Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson. Kupp averaging 8 fantasy points per game, and Jefferson averaging 5.2. There are no turnovers, so we'll look at their averages. And then, of course, looking at their share. Unfortunately, again, we can't see it with Kupp, but I did see it before. If you want to go back, you can look at that, but it's about 13.5% for both of these. We'll also see those in the tight ends. And then that's also about the 3rd largest on the team. Jefferson gets about 11.7% of the team's target shares and about 10.1% of the team's total receiving yard share. And then looking at our tight ends, you have A.J. Barner and Chig, whose again, last name I have not learned how to say. A.J. Barner gets about 9.3 fantasy points per game, and Chig gets about 6.6. Neither of them have any turnovers, so then we'll move on and look at their target share, with 11.6% of the team's targets going to A.J. Barner and 10.5% of the team's receiving yards, and with Chig, 14.9% of the team's target share and 18% of the team's receiving yards. Even though that doesn't give Chig the largest target share, that does give him the largest receiving share of anybody else on the team. So, given Tennessee's pretty bad numbers and Seattle having some pretty good numbers over here, I think it's pretty clear that Tennessee probably has a pretty tough chance at winning this game. So I would lean more with Seattle, especially with that heavy money line. But you never know, Tennessee could just click against Seattle and take it home, so we'll just have to see. So there's all your data for that game. I hope you found it interesting and useful. And if you did, leave a like and subscribe. And leave a comment on what else you might want to see in the future. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.